Well, hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. And before we head into our top focus this week, let's take a look at the headlines. Thai military seizes control of the country. Army detains at least 25 leading politicians. Military overthrows an elected government for the second time in a decade. Takeover could be severe and include sharp curbs on Thailand's freewheeling news media. Amid tensions, Libyan Deputy Vice President proposes national elections in June. The election announcement appears to be an attempt to ease tensions between rival military forces. Renegade General calls for a crisis government in the country. Biggest attack in years kills 31 and leaves several others injured in China's troubled Xinjiang region. China calls the attack in the regional capital of Urumqi a serious violent terrorist incident, vows to come down hard on those behind the attacks. Deadly terror attack on Indian consulate foiled in Afghanistan. All Indian personnel safe. 4 terrorists gunned down. Narendra Modi condemns the attack. Well, just days after martial law in Thailand, the army announced taking over the government in a coup. The army defended its move, saying that the failed talks between rival parties have forced it to take such a step. The army said that it is necessary to restore peace in the country. The coup follows 6 months of political turmoil in Thailand. Here's a report.
After talks between Thailand's political rivals failed to bear fruit, the Thai military today announced a coup in the country. In a televised announcement, the army chief said the military has taken control of the government and has suspended the constitution. He vowed to restore order and enact political reforms in the country. The army chief said the international relations would not be affected by the coup.
เพื่อเป็นการปฏิรูปโครงสร้างทางการเมืองเศรษฐกิจสังคมและอื่นๆเพื่อให้เกิดความชอบธรรมกับทุกพวกทุกฝ่ายคณะรักษาความสงบแห่งชาติซึ่งประกอบด้วยกองทัพบก
Army's move found support from Thai citizens. They say people are dissatisfied with the government's attempts at controlling the protest.
ดีครับผมถูกใจเลยครับถูกใจคนส่วนใหญ่ครับก็เพราะรัฐบาลนี่มันโกงประเทศนะฮะปล้นประเทศชาติไปไม่รู้เท่าไหร่แล้ว
ผมว่าความคิดของผมว่ามันในสถานการณ์ช่วงนี้ออกมาก็ถูกต้องอยู่เพราะว่าถ้าไม่ออกมาช่วงนี้ทางฝ่ายนู้นก็ทางฝ่ายทาง
A nationwide curfew has been imposed from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. local time. The army chief in a statement said he would be heading a ruling military body, the National Peace and Order Maintaining Council, but the upper house of parliament and courts would continue to function. The cabinet has been asked to report to the military. TV broadcasting has been suspended and political gatherings have also been banned. The decision came shortly after political party leaders were taken away by soldiers. In the first round of talks on Wednesday, the army chief called on all rival factions to reach a compromise to end the 6 months of unrest in the country. But the talks ended inconclusively, with neither side backing down. The Thai army has a long history of intervening in politics. There have been 18 previous successful or attempts of coup in the country.
And joining me on the show today is Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, former Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs and former Ambassador to Thailand. Welcome to the show, Mr. Chakravarty. How is this particular military takeover in Thailand really going to affect the country on the whole, and for that matter, even the region and the neighbors?
I think the first impact will be on its economy, on Thailand's economy. Although, as you know, Thailand is a very tourist-friendly country. It gets about 28 million tourists a year. Almost 20% of its GDP comes from tourism-related activities. So there will be a dampening effect on tourism and the economy. New investments will not come in. Thailand is a major source of automobile manufacturing and a lot of other digital equipment, particularly investments from Japan. And of course, as the United States has just announced, they will stop military cooperation and stop military aid. So it will have an effect on the Thai economy. Though not a very great one, because Thailand is used to military coups.
It's not something new.
Not something new. I think it is in Thailand. the DNA of the Thai army has a coup written very large in it. They have had, I think, conducted about 19 coups in 1932, which is about 19 in 82 years. So it's not a bad record for an army which tries to interfere in politics. Thai politics itself has become very divided.
Yes.
There is a huge cleavage. So that is one of the reasons why this coup has taken place. It's also a power struggle in the country between the old elite, the royalists and others, against the new elite.
Was the military really looking for a chance like this? Everything that has happened in the recent past as far as democracy is concerned has just given them that extra mileage to just go for the kill.
Given the background of the Thai military, they were probably reluctant to begin with. But I think the inevitable happened because of the squabbling politicians who could not come to any agreement. I think the opposition was also playing unfair. And from what I know is that the opposition may have been taken into confidence by the army chief. And the opposition may have actually felt that let there be a coup, at least we'll get rid of this government. So I see that there is an element of a conspiracy there between the opposition, who are of course pro-royalists and who come from that old elite, who are backed by the old elite. So that has happened, I think. And I think the army, perhaps reluctant at first, but now, of course, the die is cast. They have taken power.
How serious is this takeover? How long do you expect it to last? And do you see the military staying put there for some years to come, or maybe even many months?
I think the Thai army chief has already told the election commission to stop all preparations for the elections, which were actually scheduled for July 20th. So no elections, and I don't foresee any elections for at least a few years, perhaps 2, perhaps 3. And till what the army says, they will do political reforms. I really don't know what they mean by that. I mean, last time they tried political reforms, it led to another coup against Yingluck Shinawat's brother, Thaksin Shinawat, who was Prime Minister till 2006. And then they banned his party. Then hundreds of politicians were banned from doing politics. If that is the kind of political reform they intend to do, then we'll probably see more of the same. But unfortunately, that's not a solution to the problems, the political problems in Thailand.
Interesting that you said that's not a solution. So do we see any of the world leaders really stepping in and taking some kind of concrete measures? How do you see the world leaders reacting to the situation now in Thailand?
I think the world will go into a mode of benign neglect because the world is used to seeing Thailand come under the rule of the military from time to time. And as you can see from some of the reaction, it's generally been muted. People have, I mean, most of the big countries like USA, India, Japan have called for restoration of democracy and a quick return to, to civilian government. But these are very anodyne statements, and I do not think it will go beyond this. There will be a business as usual attitude to some extent, but I think it's a bad omen for the region and for ASEAN, the 10-member country. After all, ASEAN has decided that it will go into an arrangement which is like a common market by 2015. Now, what this means for that kind of a thing, and ASEAN unfortunately does not have functions on the basis that it will never criticize a member country for anything.
Yes.
So that also, will not create any pressure on Thailand. So I don't see much international pressure being put on Thailand.
Okay.
And so Thailand will be under military rule for at least 2-3 years. Okay. Till such time they come up with some alternate political solution, and the contours of which I do not see yet emerging.
Let's talk about India now. Of course, India and Thailand have shared great ties in the past, and they continue to share great ties. Do you see some kind of a hindrance as far as these ties are concerned with the military now taking over?
Well, India, apart from expressing concern and quick restoration of democracy, has withdrawn a contingent of military who were there for an annual exercise we have with the Thai military called Maitri, which is friendship.
Yes.
I think they have done the right thing to withdraw, because this is not the time to really engage the Thai military once it has taken this kind of a step in subverting democracy in our neighborhood. And Thailand, though does not share a land boundary with India, but we do share a maritime boundary with Thailand in the Andaman Sea.
Yes.
And we do have exercises with them, naval exercises, and the current army exercises have been called off. So India has shown that it does not approve of what has happened. But beyond that, I think it's unlikely that India is going to take any further step.
Okay, let's not forget also that several other countries have already issued travel advisories to several of its tourists who are traveling to several of their citizens who are traveling to Thailand. Now, India, let's not forget, several Indian tourists happen to go to Thailand on a yearly basis, and that number is rather large. Do you see some kind of a problem as far as these tourists are concerned?
Well, as far as I know, India, people from India tourists from India, I think almost 1.2 million annually. And I don't see any major problem for tourists, apart from the fact that there is a night curfew, so they won't be able to loiter around or move around at night. Thailand's coups have generally been bloodless, and the Thai people are not prone to indulge in violence, apart from certain aberrations that have happened. There's not much of violence in these kind of incidents. As you have seen, they have called in all the politicians and they have been detained. And they have not been detained. They'll probably be put in some five-star hotel and detained for a few days till things calm down, till they can actually set up an interim government, which will be led by generals and some army-friendly politicians, which has been the pattern in Thailand for many years. So till that time, the politicians will be sort of kept, wined and dined somewhere and told to stay put, and then they will be released. And that is how it has happened in Thailand, and I foresee that it will happen again in a very similar manner.
There have been several protests on the streets of Thailand as well, not too loud protests or not any violent protests, but people have come out and expressed how they are feeling, of course. Do you see the lifestyle of the people now being subdued or curbed by the military there in Thailand?
Well, one of the complaints that have come out from ordinary Thais is that they have switched off all the TV channels. But that's I suppose, a trivial thing compared to what has happened. There have been protests, you are absolutely right, and some of those protesters have been taken away. Usually they are not arrested, they are just taken away and let off somewhere else.
Yes.
Because they don't want to really instigate more protests. So I think they are dealing with it with a mild hand, so to speak, not with a heavy hand.
Yes.
There will be some protests, and protests will continue. But I don't think that is going to have any major impact on the course of things in Thailand.
Okay.
And I'm afraid the army rule is there to stay for some time.
All right, the army rule is there to stay for some time is what our guest is saying at this point in time. Thank you so much, Mr. Pinak, Ranjan Chakravarty, for joining us here in our studio and sharing your thoughts and insights as far as the Thailand crisis is concerned. Moving on, now the Indian Consulate in Afghanistan's Herat was attacked early on Friday. Security forces gunned down 4 gunmen who tried to enter the complex. The operation lasted for about 10 hours. The Ministry of External Affairs confirmed that all officials inside the consulate were safe and unharmed. PM designate Narendra Modi thanked the Afghan president for a quick and effective response to the attack. Here's a report.
At a time when Afghan President Hamid Karzai is set to attend the swearing-in ceremony of PM-designate Narendra Modi in Delhi, the Indian consulate in Herat city came under attack. Gunmen armed with heavy weapons like grenade launchers tried to break into the complex early on Friday.
تعداد 5 نفر مهاجم داخل یک خانه مسکونی شدند با استفاده از فامیلا را به گروگان گرفتند و می‌خواهند که سر قنصل هندوستان هجوم بیارند که با مقاومت نیروهای قطع خاص و اردو و قطعات مواجه شدند. فعلا
The assault began at 3:35 a.m. when the gunmen opened fire from a nearby house with machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. One of them was shot dead while he was trying to scale the wall of the consulate. 2 other attackers were surrounded by over 150 security personnel, including the ITBP. Nearly 10 hours later, the 4th man was also shot.
There were 23 ITBP personnel under command of Inspector Manjeet Singh, and it has been successfully repulsed. Not only that, we have also achieved a kill, which is rated very highly. So this was a Fidayeen attack, obviously.
No group has so far claimed responsibility for the attack. The attack comes at a time when Afghanistan is in campaign mode for the forthcoming presidential elections in June. Afghan President Hamid Karzai called PM-elect Modi, who thanked him for the efforts of the Afghan forces to stop the attackers.
All Indians at the Consulate in Herat are safe. Our senior diplomats, including Foreign Secretary Sujata Singh, are monitoring the situation and are in regular touch with their Afghan counterparts.
This isn't the first time that Indian missions in Afghanistan have come under attack. The Indian embassy in Kabul was attacked twice in 2008 and 2009 that left 75 people dead. In August last year, a failed bombing against the Indian consulate in Jalalabad killed 9 people. Afghanistan has seen a surge in attacks in recent weeks as foreign troops begin to withdraw from the country.
We'll slip into a short break now, but on the other side, we'll tell you all about the deadliest attack in China in years. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. Well, heavy security was placed in some cities of China after a deadly blast in a market in Xinjiang. The alleged attack by the separatists killed 31 and left over 90 injured. Pledging to strengthen the crackdown on the terrorists, President Xi Jinping promised severe punishment for the guilty. Here's more.
Deadly attacks in China's western region of Xinjiang on Thursday killed at least 31 people and left more than 90 injured. The attackers crashed 2 cars into shoppers at a market and threw explosives. Witnesses heard a series of small explosions with smoke billowing everywhere.
今天早上7点50分许，在新疆乌鲁木齐沙依巴克区的公园北街早市发生了一起严重的暴力袭击案。暴徒在人员密集的早市驾车冲撞碾压人群，引爆爆炸装置，造成31人死亡，94人受伤。
The Ministry of Public Security termed it a violent terrorist incident. This is the latest incident of attacks allegedly by the Islamist militants in Xinjiang region in recent months. Chinese President Xi Jinping called for severe punishment for the terrorists. The government expressed confidence in its capability to crack down on the terrorists. New security measures have also been announced for key areas in Beijing.
这次恐怖暴力事件再次显示了暴力恐怖分子反人类、反社会、反文明的本质，应该遭到中国人民和国际社会的同声谴责。事件发生以后，习近平主席要求迅速侦破案件。
Earlier this week, Chinese courts sentenced 39 people on terrorism charges. They were accused of crimes ranging from inciting violence and distributing recordings with extremist content to illegally making firearms and promoting ethnic hatred.
Well, Libya proposed a June national election as the government sought to resolve a standoff over parliament involving powerful brigades of former rebel fighters. Libya's General National Congress is at the heart of the crisis after gunmen claiming loyalty to a renegade former general attacked the parliament demanding its suspension. Here's a report.
وكذلك تخلت عنه المحكمة العليا 25/6/2019.
A Libyan renegade general called on the government to hand over power to the country's top judges, mounting a challenge against Tripoli as heavy fighting erupted in the capital. Western powers fear a call by General Khalifa Haftar for army units to join his campaign will split the nascent military and trigger more turmoil as the country struggles to restore order 3 years after the fall of strongman Muammar Gaddafi.
بعد أن رفض المؤتمر الوطني المنتهية صلاحيته تلبية مطالب الشعب، وكذلك تخلت عنه المحكمة العليا ولجنة الستين، فإن المجلس الأعلى للقوات المسلحة يعلن المجلس الأعلى للقضاء بموجب هذا البيان رغبة الجيش الوطني في استمرار الحياة المدنية واستقرار الحياة السياسية والأمنية في ليبيا، ويطالبهم بتكليف مجلس أعلى لرئاسة الدولة.
The council is independent and is one of the few state bodies respected by Libyans tired of anarchy and militias. Haftar said government and parliament had lost any legitimacy because they were unable to purge the opaque producer of extremists roaming around unchallenged. His campaign got a boost after Libya's top air defense commander declared support for his campaign. Meanwhile, Parliament split between Islamist and anti-Islamist forces said it would hold elections on June 25th.
قرر أن يكون يوم الأربعاء 25/6/2014 هو يوم الاقتراع لانتخاب مجلس النواب القادم.
The June 25th election announcement appeared to be an attempt to ease tensions between forces loyal to former General Khalifa Haftar and rival Islamist militia brigades. 3 years after the end of Gaddafi's one-man rule, Libya remains in constant upheaval. Its government fragile, parliament split, and the nascent army unable to control rival bands of former rebels who often challenge the state.
Well, there have been several other things that have been taking place around the globe. Here's a quick roundup of the other international news. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a multi-billion-dollar gas deal with China. The agreement is seen as a major breakthrough in the relations between the two countries. The deal was signed at a summit in Shanghai. It gives China 38 billion cubic meters of natural gas every year from 2018 for 30 years. The arrangement is vital for Russia as well. Facing the prospect of European Union sanctions over Ukraine, Russia is seeking an alternative energy market for its gas. Over 100 people were killed in central Nigeria late on Tuesday after twin bombs ripped through a crowded marketplace in the city of Jos. Over 56 were reportedly injured. Nigeria's relief agency said that the death toll could go up as many more are reported missing. The explosions which targeted Terminus Market went off some 20 to 30 minutes apart, setting fire to the entire venue. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but it seems like the handiwork of Boko Haram. An Egyptian court sentenced ousted President Hosni Mubarak to 3 years in prison on charges of stealing public funds. The 86-year-old Mubarak is also on trial for abuse of power and conspiring to kill protesters during the 2011 uprising. 2 of his sons were convicted and jailed for 4 years. The court imposed fines of $3 million and ordered them to repay the $17.6 million they were accused of stealing. Mubarak has denied all charges. He's called the prosecution's case completely unsubstantiated. Mubarak has been under house arrest at a military hospital since August 2013. At least 60 militants were killed in precision bombing by Air Force jets in Pakistan's North Waziristan region. The Air Force bombers pounded rebel positions known for Al-Qaeda-linked Taliban strongholds. A huge cache of arms and IED-making explosive materials have also been destroyed in these strikes. Pakistan's army has adopted a policy of aerial strikes in response to bombings by the Taliban. The use of aerial strikes was put on hold after the government initiated peace talks in January. Presidential elections in Malawi closed on Tuesday evening amid allegations of irregularities in the polling process by the opposition camp. The vote has been marred by violence in the country. There were reports of voters torching voting materials and blocking roads after delays and mishaps at polling stations. The incumbent President Joyce Banda, Southern Africa's first female head of state, faced 11 challengers in the polls. Shifting focus now, let's bring you up to date with all the sporting news from across the world in this quick roundup. Luis Enrique has been appointed the new coach of Barcelona. The former midfielder has signed a 2-year deal with the Catalans. He replaced Gerardo Martino after a disappointing trophy-less season. Recently, Enrique stepped down as the coach of Celta Vigo midway through his 2-year contract. He had taken over from Pep Guardiola as coach of Barca's B team in 2008 before a brief and troubled stint at Serie A club AS Roma. Argentinian forward Lionel Messi arrived in Buenos Aires to train with the national side ahead of the Football World Cup. The 26-year-old playmaker said that he is completely focused and is ready to perform well for the national side. Messi had a disappointing season in Spain this season, with Barcelona failing to win a major trophy for the first time in 6 years. The four-time Ballon d'Or winner will start training with the rest of the squad on May 26th. Portugal coach Paulo Bento announced his 23-man squad for the FIFA World Cup. Forwards Cristiano Ronaldo, Eder, Helder Postiga, Hugo Almeida, Nani, Rafa, Varela and Vieirinha will make the trip to Brazil. Ricardo Quaresma, overlooked in both 2006 and 2010, had made the provisional list of 30 but was among the unlucky 7 to be axed by the coach. Brazilian soccer legend Pelé is concerned about the nation's ace striker Neymar. He said that there is too much weight of expectation on Neymar's shoulders to take Brazil to World Cup victory. Brazilians are counting on their newest wonder kid Neymar to replicate the feats of Pelé. The Pakistani Supreme Court reinstated Najam Sethi as the chairman of the Pakistan Cricket Board just 4 days after he was replaced by Zaka Ashraf. Last week, the Islamabad High Court had reinstated Ashraf as the head of the organization, but a 3-member apex court annulled the court's order. The Supreme Court has now issued notices to the concerned parties to appear before it on May 27th for further hearing and arguments of the petition. That's it on this edition of World Panorama. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week.